What they did not see was when we went out on that tug, and that ship was offshore close by the horizon, and there were Barbadians on board the ship in their staterooms, some of them on the balconies looking out to see Barbados is right there. Home is just in sight, but I don't know if I'm going to get to go home. So the very first ship that came to Barbados where there was suspected cases was a Carnival Fascination. And when that vessel was coming, there were Barbadians on board. There were about 39 Barbadians on board that ship. And the message came in, we were launching a logistics study that morning with the Commonwealth Secretariat at LASC. And the message came in that there is a vessel coming our way that has suspected cases. And I can smile about it now, but at the time, we were in intense mode because everybody was fearful and the guys on the ground were very concerned. And I remember us leaving the session to run, having a huddle in almost a closet in an adjacent room at LASC because at the time we had to keep it tight. And then we left others. We closed out the meeting while managing the situation in the port simultaneously. We left LASC in the wrap-up meeting with our team members who have flown in from the UK, from the Commonwealth Secretariat, who was giving us technical assistance on that project. And the board members, the management of the port, and the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, along with the representatives of the Ministry of Health, we went to the port and we met with the workers in that real moment of fear, and the ship was held offshore for the entire time that we were there until we were able to settle what we were going to do. There were things that people were asking for, like longer gloves up to their elbows because they didn't want to touch the ropes for the ship because it was early and people weren't sure what this virus was and how they could contract it. And so even if it didn't seem to you as if it made any sense using the science, you still had to cater to people's fears and deal with them where they were. And so whatever their requests were, we did that and we met them. And then when the decision came that we were going to bring the ship in, and normally when you're bringing in a ship, there's a tug boat that goes out, meets the ship, and ushers it in. I said to the guys, we've convinced you that you're going to do this. And we've told you it's safe, the medical teams are here. But I'm not going to send you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So in my heels and my dress, I got on that tugboat that evening and went out to sea on board that tug and brought in the Carnival Fascination along with the other guys on the ground. And that was the very first ship. And I did that may have been 2 more times. I think the second time I did it was a Sunday afternoon with the Costa Magica. There were confirmed cases on board that ship. They were not disembarking any passengers here, but we were provisioning the ship, giving it food and water and medical supplies. And myself and Dr. Anton Best that Sunday evening again got on the tug and brought that ship in and supported it. But the Carnival Fascination was special because that ship had been rejected at 2 ports before it came to Barbados. And there were Barbadians like us who were on board. What people saw when they saw us on board the ship later that night around 10 o'clock when the ship was cleared and PM and all of us went on board the vessel was one part of it. What they did not see was when we went out on that tug and that ship was offshore close by the horizon, and there were Barbadians on board the ship in their staterooms, some of them on the balconies looking out to see Barbados is right there. Home is just in sight, but I don't know if I'm going to get to go home. Watching people and the emotion on their faces on that ship just offshore Barbados that evening was a powerful experience for me. And I remember all of us on that boat said, let's take our people home. And we brought that ship in that evening. But people saw the reality of feeling trapped on a cruise ship. And in this case, you were trapped in a cruise ship offshore, your own home country. And I think that also shored up for us that we have to be in a position as people to help future persons on board these vessels, to help them get, well, two things. There were many times when people would call and they would say congratulations. But one person called and they said, I don't know if I should say congratulations or commiserations, because you are being thrown in literally at the deep end. Who wants to be Minister of Tourism in the middle of a global pandemic that is affecting international travel and the industry in this way? But the Prime Minister did say to me at the same time, on the other hand, this is a moment for change. It is a moment where you have to use the time to restructure the industry and to emerge at the end of this season with something that's new and something that's innovative and something that takes Barbados into a new direction. And I think that's what captures my attention even now. There's no question in anyone's mind that this is an extraordinarily challenging time. Every single day, all of us who work in tourism are challenged by the reports in the press of what's happening with tourism workers. When we had World Tourism Day, I focused my own comments on the issues that were specific to workers. Prime Minister has spoken at great length about the BEST program, in particular those officers in the Ministry of Finance and in the National Insurance Scheme who are working every single day to make sure that we employ and re-engage our workforce, because the workers have been on the front line and there's no question about that. So it's a tremendously challenging time for everyone. And when we talk about workers right now, and that's what people see, and that's critical. It's important, it's urgent, and it matters. What many people don't see at the same time is the transformation that is and must go on in the background. Even before COVID struck, Barbados' tourism product needed a refresh. And I've been saying this in the last couple of weeks, even more so because I've heard some comments that, perhaps suggest that there needs to be a mindset shift. We have had a narrow conversation in this country for as long as I can remember about tourism on the basis of occupancy rates in hotels and arrivals at the airport. If that is all that tourism was, then we would not have seen the kind of economic impact that the country has had with the cessation of international travel. We would not have seen the ripple impact on construction, on beauty salons, on laundries. And I use the example of a dry cleaner all the time. I went to a dry cleaner a couple of months ago, right after lockdown, and I went to take my laundry in, because for some of us who didn't stop working during lockdown, places were closed, but I still had to take, I had to go to work every day, so I still had to take my stuff in. And they said to me, we're not open yet. And I said, but I thought most businesses had reopened. And they said, well, 85% of my business is actually from hotels. When we couldn't go to the supermarket, and many of us resorted to using distributors who then became retailers in some instances, and wholesalers who became retailers, and were buying in bulk as people were uncertain about supplies, many of them have struggled because of the downturn in the economy. If tourism was narrowly limited to questions about arrivals and occupancy rates, the kind of downstream economic impact that we have seen would not occur. And that should say that we're not talking about hotels and destination on its own and attractions when we talk about tourism. We're talking about development. We're talking about a value and a supply chain that integrates every single productive sector. And so the way I see my role at this point is to build an entirely new model for tourism that takes all of that into account, well beyond where we currently were. So in the same way, for example, that I was dealing before COVID struck in the port with building a new master plan for the port, now I'm no longer building a master plan for the port, but I'm building a master plan for a sector that touches every single productive sector. We talk about tourism, for example, and that becomes a flagship conversation that we have, but we forget that the ministry also is international transport. So what you will be seeing coming onto the ministry is the creation of an entirely new aviation strategy for the country. And that aviation strategy is going to drive our air transport system. It's going to create upstream and downstream economic opportunities. So the notion of commercial planes coming in at the airport to bring passengers who are smiling and waving and receiving the steel pan at the airport, that will remain important, of course, but there's so much more to an aviation sector than simply commercial jets bringing in tourists. So we're talking about things like aircraft maintenance, flight safety. We're talking also about things like private aircraft services, expanding our cargo handling mechanisms. And so we are going to be coming in, we expect within the next 5 months or so, with not just a new strategy, but a new suite of legislative reforms that brings the international transport sector into the third decade of the 21st century, and then allows us to move into becoming a Category 1 airport. So we have a significant overhaul of everything that is related to tourism. And I think the key thing for me here is that my own specialization is international trade. That's my background, international trade and development. And so tourism is trade, and trade is tourism. It's an export service. And so anyone who is of the view that we're talking about arrivals and occupancy rates and does not understand the economic value of tourism as a tradable sector does not have an understanding of what tourism is. And so we're spending our time equally on the issues of the day and on the issues of the future in this ministry.